Bueno, normalmente cuando uno tiene conversaciones con otros cristianos, ¿no? De diferentes denominaciones, normalmente sale el tema de sola escritura y que realmente Lutero, bueno, como dicen muchos, ¿no? Se inventó el término, ¿no? Entonces, ¿qué puede decirnos al respecto?
Uh, yeah, that's interesting. Luther, I don't know if he even used the slogan "Sola Scriptura," but certainly he believed in the supreme authority of Scripture, and this idea was not new to Luther. It was an idea that had been the main understanding of the Church in many ways up really till the 13th or 14th century. I would say that what changes about that time is that increasingly what the church teaches publicly and what Scripture teaches are begin to uh, possibly be at odds with each other. There's a theologian named William of Ghent who asked the question if what Scripture taught and what the church taught actually could disagree with each other, and so there wasn't really much of a sense that could ever be the case, and so he affirmed that it could. But there were other people who uh, promoted the idea of Scripture as the standard and the church as a basis of church reform prior to Luther. So, for example, John Wycliffe and Jan Hus, sometimes called proto-reformers, took this position. But Luther's position that Scripture serves as sort of the supreme authority was promoted by the mainstream of the medieval theologians. So, for example, if you read Thomas Aquinas's Summa, in the first section of his Summa, he says that articles of the faith can only be established on the basis of Scripture, and that everything else is just a mere opinion, right? Now, does Thomas Aquinas promote doctrines that Lutherans would view as being extra scriptural? Yes, but he doesn't see them as being extra scriptural because he has a different interpretation of the Bible and also a looser understanding, possibly, of how Scripture can be applied in the life of the church. Later on, though, many of the late medieval theologians developed the idea that there could be extra biblical tradition that could establish articles of the faith. And that later then became established after the Reformation at the Council of Trent. It should also be observed that some of the early church fathers talk about an oral tradition, an apostolic tradition that was handed down from the apostles, and Catholics oftentimes appeal to this fact as to suggest that they're what's referred to as the two-source theory, the idea that the apostles wrote some of the teachings down and others they decided to hand down orally. They claim that therefore has some precedence in the early church. And they're correct that people in the early church do talk about an apostolic tradition that's been handed down orally. But when they'll tell you what's in it, and what's in it is the same content as is in Scripture. So for the church fathers, there is an agreement that the apostles have written down all the teachings in the New Testament, and that even if they have an oral tradition that they think goes back to the apostles, it adds no extra doctrines that could be added on to Scripture. So materially, for most of the church history, the church actually agreed with what Luther was teaching in principle, mainly that no doctrine can be established apart from the ultimate authority of Scripture.